Well, good morning to you. We certainly have a very special group of seniors with us here today that we're graduating and that we're recognizing this year. This is my third senior Sunday, and it feels like it's gotten harder and harder to say goodbye to these seniors every year. And granted, the first year I had been here for like a month, so sorry to Mary, wherever you are, it really wasn't that hard to say goodbye to you. But this group of seniors has been very active, and Danica and I have been very blessed to see them grow over the past 2 years. And I'm very blessed to be able to honor all three of you today. Today, what I want to talk about is just why graduating is important. To do that, I have some very different perspectives to share with you from different people of different walks of life, because senior year, and especially the month of May, is just so busy. And senioritis starts to kick in. I'm pretty sure, Amy, you've been talking about senioritis since like August. I think you're ready to be done. But you can forget that you've been working towards this goal for 12 years. And so I asked a couple people around from different areas of life on just why graduating high school is important. The first perspective I have is from a younger kid's perspective. This is from Kenna Kennedy. Kenna said, to help out the community and to make money. A junior high perspective, this is from PJ. PJ said, because it helps you in life and looks good on your reputation. Cooper and Kaysen, from the high school perspective, Cooper said, most jobs won't take you seriously if you don't graduate high school. And then Kaysen said, so you can experience the outside world. And this is where we see a little bit of a shift in perspective. This is the college kid's perspective. I got Mary to give me a thought, and this is kind of a lengthy thought. But she said, graduating from high school, yeah. She said, graduating from high school can feel like a requirement to check off the list of life. But there are several reasons why graduating and persevering through the difficulties of high school are so important. The piece of paper you will leave with represents more than just completed classes. It means commitment, discipline, and the ability to follow through. No matter what you pursue after you leave high school, you have something to be proud of. You accomplished something big. You did that homework assignment you didn't want to do, you listened to the lecture from the teacher you don't like, and you made it out on the other side. The lessons you learn in high school beyond academics are ones you can take with you, such as time management, handling failure, and facing challenges. Finishing high school is a milestone. Though the academic side of high school is essential, what is even more important are the life skills and lessons you take with you after you walk the stage. So a little bit more lengthy. And I also got Jeff Stambaugh to give me kind of an adult's perspective. Not that Mary's not an adult, but catching a lot of strays today. I didn't mean to say that. But Jeff Stambaugh said, graduating is important because it means you finish the task. It's easy to start things, but what's harder and more significant is to finish things. But graduation doesn't mean that you finish learning. A wise person never stops learning. So you see these different perspectives from different ages. And at first, it started out as a means to an end. You did it to get jobs. You did it to get money or to put it on your resume. And then after, we see a shift in perspective from those who finished high school, and it became less about making money and less about anything. It became less about putting it on a resume and more about finishing something. It became more about the lessons that you learned and the skills that you developed along the way, even if you feel like you didn't learn any of those. When I was graduating high school, I remember everybody told me, congratulations, this is such a huge achievement. And I remember thinking, no, it's not. 85% of people graduate high school. Could you imagine if 85% of NFL players made the Hall of Fame? That wouldn't be special. It would be lame. So how can this be important if so many people achieve this? Well, I want to answer that question for you, and I want to approach it from the most important side of things, which is your faith. How can graduating high school be important for your faith? One example from the Bible of a graduation of sorts that I think of is Saul, who had this big name change from Saul to Paul and a different calling that he got. But the one I want to talk about today is Moses. Of course, everybody thinks of Moses with the burning bush. That's his big story. Now, there wasn't this big ceremony where they called Moses to the front and gave him a diploma and sent him on his way, but this was a huge turning point in his life. This is where things began for Moses, and this is where he received his calling. And this is where things begin for you seniors as well. So let's look at the story of Moses. We'll be in Exodus 3. Exodus 3, 1 through 6 says, Now Moses was tending to the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight of why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So this is the setup for what's about to happen. Moses is doing what he's always been doing, and he's been tending to his flock, even though it's his father-in-law's flock. But this is what he did. He was tending to his flock. And he sees this burning bush, and obviously he's curious, and so he goes over and peeks at it, and this is where God speaks to him through the bush and introduces himself. He says, I am the God of your fathers, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then as we continue to read, we see that Moses is going to receive this call to leadership from God. Exodus 3:7-10 says, the Lord said, I've indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and bring them out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I've seen the way of the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. So this is Moses' call to leadership. He's to bring the Israelites out of slavery. That's a pretty big task. And even more so, I love how God is very direct with what he's expecting of Moses. He directly tells Moses, I'm sending you to bring my people out of Egypt. And what we see here is Moses tries to get out of this. He doesn't want to do this. He thinks of every excuse that he can think of and to throw it at the wall to see if God will send somebody else to save the Israelites. And so as we continue reading, we're going to see Moses think of excuse after excuse so that God won't send him. And so let's continue reading Exodus 3:11-12. It says, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. So Moses understands. Moses clearly understands what the assignment is and what his mission is. We know this because he repeats this calling of going back to Pharaoh and bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. So again, Moses understands what he's supposed to be doing. He's just overwhelmed and he's scared. Moses responds to God's call with self-doubt. His first excuse is that he doesn't see himself as the best person to free the Israelites. So freeing the Israelites was definitely not in Moses' plans, so he just makes up all of these excuses of why it shouldn't be him. So let's continue to read some of these excuses. Exodus 3:13-14. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is who you are. This is what you are to say to them. I am has sent you. Here's the second excuse. And Moses essentially says, I don't know what to say. I don't even know who you are. His first excuse was related to his own identity, and the second excuse is related to God's identity. And his request is not entirely inappropriate. Moses expects the people to ask a very natural question of, who is it that sent you to lead us? Specifically, Moses wants to know how to answer the question of which God he's representing. So Moses is seeking advice from God regarding how to respond to this very natural question, but he's still hoping that God is going to choose someone else instead, and yet God remains and he answers with, I am who I am. We continue to read Exodus 4:1-5, and that says, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. Then the Lord said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, now reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to you. So here's the third excuse that Moses attempts to give God for why it shouldn't be him. The excuse is, they're just not going to believe me. And again, Moses raises a pretty reasonable question. Why would people believe Moses? Moses has been away from Egypt for 40 years, and furthermore, he wasn't raised among the Israelites. He was raised among Egyptians, so he hasn't experienced the same type of trauma or oppression that the life of the Israelites had. So why would they listen to him? So the Lord gives him signs, such as transforming Moses' staff into a snake, afflicting and healing leprosy on his own hand, and turning water that was poured on the ground into blood. And these were to prove God's power. and give Moses a little bit of comfort, that he had something in his back pocket that he could kind of throw out there and lean on, and it's supposed to give him comfort. But even seeing these miraculous signs didn't stop Moses from coming up with yet another excuse. If you read his final excuse, Exodus 4:10-17, it says, Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I'm slow of speech and tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you and speak. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." But Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send somebody else." Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, "What about your brother, Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so you can perform signs with it." So this is the last excuse that Moses gives. And the last one is, "I'm just not a good speaker." Now Moses again is expressing more doubts about who he is, about himself, and he's claiming to be a poor speaker. And there's really no suggestion in Scripture that he had an actual speech impediment, although I guess that is possible. But what it probably means is that Moses just didn't think of himself in high regard. This is a self-confidence issue, not a speaking issue. Because we know this because if we jump over to Acts 7:22, Moses is actually commended for his speaking ability, where it says, Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. So it wasn't that he was physically unable to speak to crowds or people in general. It's just that he hadn't discovered that he had a speaking ability. It was a self-confidence issue. And God's response to this concern is essentially the same as his response in chapter 3, 13-14, where he says, "I am who I am." God just kind of says, "I'm your creator," right? God is saying, who is it that gave you a mouth or sight? God reminds Moses of who he is. And he says, surely if I gave you a mouth, then surely I can give you words to say through that mouth. And I love here Moses' final plea here in verse 13. It's the same response as when you know that you've lost an argument. You have no more reasons, no more valid excuses, and so you just put up this childlike, "Please send somebody else, God." But God doesn't. He chose Moses, and so he sent Moses. He does end up giving him his brother to help him speak, but it's still Moses who is leading the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses doesn't get out of his calling that God gave him because he's scared or doesn't think he can. And I promise you, if that's how God works, I don't think many of us would be here today. And we know from here on that Moses followed God's plan. He delivered the Israelites out of slavery, and for 40 years, Moses led them. He led the Israelites. And God kept his promise to always be with them, even when Moses messed up. And God was even with Moses until he died. We find this in Deuteronomy 34, 5-6, and it says, "And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab, as the Lord had said. He buried him in Moab in the valley opposite Beth Peor. But to this day, no one knows where the grave is." So not only was God with Moses throughout his entire life, but he even buried him in secret. I think that's kind of special. Moses' life was a journey, and the burning bush is where he received his calling. And then the next phase of life for you is where you'll receive yours. It probably won't be given to you as you walk across the stage, but the next phase of life is where your calling starts to become clearer and clearer. So seniors, what I want to leave you with is I want to leave you with 3 life lessons from Moses to help you with your calling. The first one is very easy. Embrace your calling. All 3 of you are extremely gifted. Ethan, your ability to connect with the younger boys in the youth group is amazing. One of my favorite memories from Winterfest 2024, which if you remember, I don't have very many good memories from that Winterfest. We were staying in that Airbnb, and there was a super king-size bed. I mean, this was the biggest bed I've ever seen. And you, Corbin, and PJ all slept on that massive bed. And there was probably enough room for like 4 or 5 people. And y'all were spaced out when we went to bed, but then when I woke up the next morning, y'all were as close as could be, just like sardines. I think that type of relationship between a senior and a group of junior high boys is very special, and it's rare. Another one of your gifts you have is you have this playful energy about you, that no matter where we go or what's going on, you're just going to have a good time. And that brings everybody so much joy around you. And I have no doubt that God is going to use that inclusivity and that joy to impact the lives of others, and I know that he already has. Amy, you have this special ability to connect one-on-one with people. You've never been one to be at the center of attention, but you love a good conversation. Couldn't begin to count the number of times that I've looked over on a Wednesday night after class is over and you're sitting there one-on-one on the couch with somebody in a deep conversation. You're also not shy about your faith with your school friends. You routinely will bring your friends on a Wednesday night, and I think one of your friends is actually here today. But you seem to have conquered this fear of worlds colliding with school and church together. I have no doubt that God is going to continue to use that special ability of yours to connect with someone who needs it and to share your faith, and hopefully at M4C next semester. Natalie, two of your gifts are your authenticity and your heart for missions. You're a very authentic and vulnerable person in your regular life. You do not put up this front that a lot of people put up. If you're struggling or having a bad day, you're just going to be honest about it. And that authenticity is a really good quality to have. You also have this desire and passion for missions. I saw this at Camp Contact a couple years ago. I've never seen you work so hard or passionately about something that I did that week. You got paired up with a pretty difficult buddy, but you made it through, and you made an impact on them. So I hope you hang on to that passion for missions and allow God to work through you wherever he leads you. So embrace the calling that God has given you. God has equipped each of you with the abilities and the people around you to fully embrace those unique callings. 1 Peter 4:10-11 says, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. We saw Moses list just about every excuse that he could think of to get out of God's calling for him. And God equipped Moses to succeed in his calling. God refuted all of those excuses. And God has also equipped you as well to embrace your calling. The second life lesson from Moses, and maybe one that we could all hear today, stop doubting yourself. Moses said that he wasn't special. Moses said, I'm not a good speaker. Moses said, nobody would listen to me. But God said, I'm sending you. God said, I will help you speak. I will teach you. What God says about you is found in Ephesians 2:10. It says, for we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. So stop doubting what a wonderful masterpiece God made you to be. Stop making excuses like Moses did. You are God's masterpiece. The third and final lesson I want to leave you with is to think about your purpose, not your plan. Your plans, without a doubt, won't go your way. It's like that old saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Moses didn't think about his purpose. All he was thinking about was his plan. He wanted to tend to his flock and go under the radar, and God even directly told him what his purpose was. And yet, Moses still wanted his own plan. Proverbs 19:21 says, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. So today, tomorrow, or whenever your plans don't work out how you wanted them to, I want you to remember to think about your purpose and not your plan. Graduating high school is just the beginning for you. It may not feel that impressive or important, but what is important is that God has a big plan for you. God has a big purpose for you.